This conference will now be recorded.
For reviewing pleasure later. Okay.
All right, we'll just start. All right, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Aralda Agoli. I'm the Economic Resiliency Coordinator with the South Florida Planning Council, Regional Planning Council. Thank you for joining us today for the Supporting Economic Development in South Florida session. It's a little bit after 10 a.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started so that everyone keeps trickling in. I'd like to go over a couple of housekeeping items for those who might be new to GoToMeeting, but it's just the same as sort of Zoom and Microsoft Teams. You cannot be on two devices, please, at the same time, or it will cause audio feedback for everyone. When you speak, we encourage you to please do so. We ask that you identify yourself by name and organization. Of course, please yourself if you're not speaking, and try and keep your cameras on if you can to make the meeting as interactive as possible. If you are calling in, you can unmute yourself by pressing *6. Please let us know in the chat box if you're having any issues, or you can privately message me or Mark Cassidy, and we'll try to help you out. Also, please note that this meeting is being recorded. Lastly, please use the chat box if you would like to comment, but don't necessarily want to speak up right then. And moving on to the next slide is our agenda. The overall purpose of the session is to, some of you know our work at the council and mission of the council, for like how we collaborate and with municipalities in our outreach program, but give also an overview of the role, mission, work and grant funding opportunities of the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration. Greg Bidet will be our guest speaker today. The coronavirus technical assistance services and coronavirus aid relief and economic security act, CARES Act program. Then we'll open it up for questions and open discussion. With that, our executive director of the South Florida Regional Planning Council, Isabel, would like to welcome you all, and thank you for joining us. All right, Isabel.
Good morning, everyone. I think I know most of y'all after being here for more than 25 years. I'm so happy to see everybody here. But for those who may not know me, my name is Isabel Cosio Carballo, and I have the privilege of being the executive director of the Regional Planning Council. I started with the council in 1996, and I have the best staff around. And so I'm delighted to be here. And the Regional Planning Council, as you know, is a regional governmental agency and public policy agency, and we represent Miami-Dade and Broward counties. And we have a really great board, including, we have former great board members like Mira Martel. Our board is a public-private board made up of elected county municipal officials, governor's appointees, and ex officio members from around the region. So we have a really good mix of folks and the ability to help move issues on a regional basis. We're also the Economic Development District for the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration, and we've had that responsibility and privilege since 1994. And so a lot of people don't know that, but all the regional councils actually have a very strong economic development role. And with that, I am again delighted to welcome you here, and thank you so much for your time. I know everyone has many things to do and probably too many Zoom meetings on their calendar. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mark Cassidy of our staff, our Economic Development and Research Manager. Thank you.
Well, actually, I will take over this portion of the presentation, Isabel. So we made a little change. I should have put probably my name in there next to yours, but
yeah, no, that's fine. I just think that you can introduce all the staff as we go forward. So we have Mark Cassidy here, and now I'll turn it over to Aralda.
Yeah, okay. Perfect. So most of you know what the council, you have heard this before, but I will run through this very quickly. The South Florida Regional Planning Council mission is to identify the long-term challenges and opportunities facing Southeast Florida and assist the region's leaders in developing and implementing creative strategies that result in more prosperous and equitable communities, healthier and cleaner environment, and a more vibrant economy. The council has served Monroe, Miami-Dade, and Broward counties since 1974. through regional collaborative planning and was designated an economic development district by EDA in 1993, through which the council offers a robust economic development program, which includes planning, technical assistance, and revolving loan fund programs for small businesses, COVID-impacted businesses, and other critical needs. So here are some examples of the technical assistance that the council provides. Economic development. This includes economic development planning through the South Florida Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or SEDS, which Mark will go over in more detail later, and Greg also will touch upon on it as well. We also offer technical assistance to communities and organizations to predict how policy decisions or economic events can impact the economy, county, region, and state level through the South Florida Economic Forecasting Partnership. Next is emergency preparedness. We operate a regular emergency management programs, including the South Florida Local Emergency Planning Committee, to assist local governments with protecting public health, safety, and the environment from chemical hazards and releases, as well as assist the State Department with hurricane evacuation modeling. For regional planning, regional development, and local government comprehensive plan review, we offer review of newly adopted comp plans, plan amendments, evaluation and appraisal reports on comp plan performance, and coordination of multi-jurisdictional agency review of large-scale development projects. For transportation, it's transportation alternative fuels. We assist transit-oriented development and the Clean Cities program, working with constituent local governments to address technical transportation issues, provide transportation modeling services, and outreach and policy support for all fuels and idle reduction. For resiliency of sea level rise, the council actively participates in climate change related pre-planning and coordinating efforts across the region as part of Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact. Council staff aids in understanding the challenges occurring in our local area, best resiliency practices, and mapping the changing shoreline. And the council offers lastly, other GIS technical assistance services and tools on a case-by-case basis to inform decision-making. For example, and Mark will go with the RAMI model further on detail later after this, but just an FYI. For example, last year, we modeled the average cost of parking at the micro-traffic analysis zone level in Miami-Dade County, and we're currently working on a study assessing impact on travel patterns in Miami-Dade County due to COVID-19. And moving on to the next slide, Mark will take it over and talk about our SEDS. Mark?
Thank you, Geraldo. So the council's primary economic development vehicle is the SEDS. And so for those of you who are not familiar, the SEDS provides economic information and a roadmap for technical assistance to local governments, private businesses, and neighborhood-based organizations with respect to creation and expansion of employment opportunities. One of the primary functions of the council as the region's economic development district, EDD, is to develop and maintain the region SEDS, which is a strategy-driven plan for economic development created with assistance from public and regional economic development leaders and stakeholders. It's not a plan for the council, but it's a strategy for the region to guide federal investment to develop economic prosperity in the region. Each regional planning council maintains their region SEDS by going through a major update every 5 years. And we also develop annual updates from time to time as instructed by EDA. Council will be working with the SEDS steering committee and regional economic development stakeholders over the next year to develop our next 5-year SEDS update, which will be for 2022 through 2027. An effective SEDS allows a region to maximize its economic development potential, as well as engage with EDA and other federal partners to receive infrastructure or technical assistance grants, such as the Public Works and Economic Adjustment Assistance Programs. An effective SEDS planning process identifies locally grown strategies that will guide regional economic development, partnership and collaboration, and improve economic outcomes and overall quality of life in our region. The end result is a document that outlines the region's competitive advantages, weaknesses, strengths, opportunities, and threats, that tells a compelling story about the region's past, present, and future, and it devises a strategy to achieve the determined goals and objectives, and it has measurable outcomes. The SEDS steering committee will convene multiple times throughout the next year in the process and will outline a cross-sector collaborative strategy and with an implementation plan and commitment to metrics of success to base the strategy around. So as Geraldo mentioned, another one of the council's economic development services is economic impact modeling. Council has access to REMI, which is an advanced economic impact modeling software, and we have access to it through our membership in the Southeast Florida Economic Forecasting Partnership. The partnership was formed in 2003 as a collaboration between Monroe, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. And REMI stands for Regional Economic Models Incorporated, which are the designers and distributors of the REMI model software. The data is updated annually, and it comes from sources such as the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Census, Bureau of Economic Analysis, and other sources. REMI has also been cited in many professional journals, including American Economic Review, Review of Economic Statistics, and is also used by economic modelers across the country to measure policy impacts or investments in a region. So REMI has developed several programs. The one that we use is called Policy Insight Plus. And the full model of PI Plus covers 160 industry sectors for every county in the United States. And the version that we have access to gives us access to the impacts in 70 industry sector groups for the state of Florida as a whole, and for each individual county in the South Florida and Treasure Coast regions, which span from Monroe County in the south to Indian River County in the north. The model is dynamic in that impacts can be measured year to year over a period of time up to 40 years in the future. And it's fully customizable, allowing users to choose from many variables or geographies. And the way it works is that it starts with the National Economic Account Model, and within that allows users to determine the economic impact changes within a region or county and vice versa. REMI is structured, allowing users to see workflow and diagrams which depict how each variable fits into the model. And REMI integrates 4 different modeling approaches or methodologies, implementing decades of economic impact research and using multiple tools and data sets such as demographics, fiscal analysis, econometrics, input-output, general equilibrium models, and just a whole suite of different methodologies building on a lot of research over the past decades to measure economic impacts. So these are the 4 core methodologies of the model. What input-output tabulation does is evaluate the relationships between industries. Econometric estimation measures the speed of economic response and the magnitude through statistical analysis. General equilibrium expresses the stabilization or balance of supply and demand within the national accounts, as I mentioned before. And new economic geography represents the spatial dimension of the economy. So for example, a job creating project in Miami-Dade County typically results in greater economic impact for Broward County as opposed to counties more north in Florida. So using PI Plus, we can quantify the impacts of investments on the regional economy as part of comprehensive economic assessments. And the model helps us determine key economic base industries, evaluate employment trends or impacts to the economy or labor markets, including many others. This could be evaluating the effectiveness of tax incentive programs, tax abatements, loans, grants, etc. We can calculate the return on investment and the benefit cost ratio as well. These are a couple of those that I just mentioned. So that's what REMI does. How has REMI been used? A few categories of model applications are on the left in blue, and so a couple of examples of these are development and energy projects, and corresponding real-world applications are on the right. For example, REMI has been used to assess impacts of downtown rehabilitation in Boston, a film tax credit program in Connecticut, and a proposed new baseball stadium in Missouri, among many others shown here. And so when you start thinking about what to model in REMI, you'll start with an input variable that you'll want to change from the current status to what you believe the new economic reality will be. For example, you choose an industry sector and the amount of investment that will go into the sector, and then you could swap the investment for jobs created, changes in wages, or any other input variable. Then you run the model to calculate the impacts of the changed input variable on the output, which could be population, income effects, GDP, and it also includes indirect and induced effects. A couple examples of induced effects would be if an increase in manufacturing jobs is your direct effect, the increase in the supplier's employment would be the indirect effect. And when there are more direct and indirect jobs in total as a result, the increased spending power of those new jobs travels further downstream for the induced effects, to say grocers or barbers who now have more employed people to serve. So now that I've talked about the model and its capabilities, I put together a simple example scenario to show you how it works. So say you have a manufacturing company that's looking to expand in County X. They're looking to invest, say, $10 million towards the expansion and expect to create 220 direct jobs with an average salary of $50,000. What you do is you take these figures, you put them into the REMI model as input values, and then you put that in for the respective county that they're going to be growing into. And then what you will do is then go ahead and calculate the outputs. And a couple of the outputs that REMI provides are listed here: total increase in employment, GDP, personal income, etc. And so in 2020, you can see the initial impact of the investment with the included indirect and induced effects in 2020. So the 220 direct jobs has indirect and induced effects, further increasing those total jobs. And what happens is these impacts compound over time, further increasing employment through the years. And it also takes into account the economy-wide impacts to demographics and the economy as a whole over the next 10 years in this example. So now that I've bombarded you with all the technical details of REMI, why do you care about REMI and its relationship with the CEDS? So as the region's EDD, the council can leverage its relationship and experience with EDA grant applications and our relationship with EDA Economic Development Representative Greg Viday. We're here to assist you to navigate through the grant application process and also help you refine your grant proposals to fit EDA's investment priorities. And so grant applications include a letter of consistency with the region CEDS from us, the council. And when you ask us for a letter of support, we can also assist you in putting together an economic impact model for the proposed project, which would highlight the return on investment and, of course, make your applications much stronger. So that's a little bit about the CEDS, REMI, our technical assistance capabilities, and how it all gets pulled together. And now I'll turn it over to Greg to discuss EDA's grant funding opportunities and considerations.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Greg. I'm just going to give you the wheel now.
Okay.
But you and you are.
Okay. All right. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So thank you all. I'm excited to be here. Just again, as a way of introduction, my name is Greg Viday. I'm the Economic Development Representative for the state of Florida for U.S. Economic Development Administration. I've been with EDA for 5 years now, and exciting time to talk with you all today. I'm going to talk to you today about how EDA helps local communities leverage their regional assets to produce long-term economic growth and stability for their respective regional economies. So again, I'm excited to be here today, and thank you all for joining us. So just to start off, EDA's mission really is to promote innovation and competitiveness across communities throughout the U.S. and to really give them the tools to really fully be integrated in the worldwide economy. Most of our work, as you see on this map here, is done through the regional offices. So when you talk to EDA, talking to me, I'm with the Atlanta Regional Office, and the project decisions and the project applications, generally speaking, come through the regional offices. We've got about 265 staff nationwide. We're a relatively small agency within the Department of Commerce, but we like to say we punch above our weight, and we actually, with our partners like South Florida Regional Planning Council, we have boots on the ground that really leverage our abilities. So when we talk about economic development, what we tell people is we provide the grant investments in various projects, non-construction, construction projects designed to create high quality jobs and leverage private sector investment, right? So we want an economy to grow. We want an economy to succeed. And our investments are regionally focused, locally derived. They're not projects that the feds are telling you, what to do. They're locally derived projects that have regional impacts, as Mark had mentioned. EDA works with a set of eligible applicants, as you see on the screen there. Generally speaking, we work with local governments across the country. In Florida, those are, of course, the cities, towns, counties, the state, the district organization, the 10 regional planning councils. We also work with federally recognized Indian tribes. We do a lot of work with colleges and universities, and we also work with nonprofits, as long as that nonprofit is engaged in a bona fide economic development activity and is supported by its local government in terms of what it's trying to achieve from an economic development standpoint. So EDA has a number of investment programs, and basically we work with communities to help them build the capacity for economic development within their respective communities through a number of projects or number of programs that range really from planning for economic development to technical assistance to infrastructure development. And you can certainly go onto our website and get a lot more detail than I can provide today. There's some hyperlinks that I've included there to talk about gives a lot more information about our programs and the funding opportunities more specifically. So it's important to realize that when you think about EDA, you want to think about the fact that within the gamut of grants for planning and technical assistance and infrastructure, essentially we have two buckets. We have a construction bucket and a non-construction bucket. And within the construction bucket, we have funded, and we will probably continue to fund, various infrastructure improvements, water, sewer, wastewater, roads, bridges. We built specialized facilities. We've built business incubators. We've done a lot of work at ports and airports, and we've done a lot of work, historically speaking, at industrial parks, which have been the hallmark of sort of industrial development for a long time. On the non-construction side, we've engaged in feasibility studies, disaster recovery strategies. There's a shot of I know Daniel here is from Monroe County. We supported an effort by Monroe County to produce its post-disaster redevelopment plan in light of the impacts to the county from Hurricane Irma. We also support revolving loan funds, establishing revolving loan funds across the country, and also increasingly looking at specialized studies like supply chain analysis. This screenshot just really kind of tells you that we are a small agency. We're funded somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 to $350 million on an annual basis. These are regular appropriations now that I'm speaking about. And of course, last year, because of the advent of the coronavirus pandemic, Congress provided EDA with a disaster supplemental of $1.5 billion to prevent, respond, and help communities basically come back from the coronavirus and provide for economic development projects that would help to make their economies whole. EDA now has been also in March of this year, EDA is going to be provided $3 billion, or has been provided $3 billion under the American Rescue Plan Act, and we're working on the NOFO as we speak. I'll have more to say about that in a minute. So let me just go back a little bit to the CARES Act funding. In March of this year, EDA was very happy to announce that it had obligated over $1 billion out of the $1.5 billion that was allocated last year congressionally for a variety of projects to deal with the economic impacts from COVID in communities. And those projects range from economic recovery planning, entrepreneurial support programs, and construction of infrastructure to support economic recovery. As I mentioned, EDA has received $3 billion under the American Rescue Plan Act. And importantly, we will have to obligate that $3 million by September 30th of 2022. So there is a timeline associated with that, and that's really important. You can certainly go on EDA's website for more information about projects funded under the coronavirus, the CARES Act for last year. So this slide really kind of, I put this slide up here because I wanted to kind of mention some of the recurring themes. When we had the coronavirus discussions, the CARES Act discussions last year, these were some of the discussions I had with communities across Florida. And they range from economic diversification strategies, tourism recovery. Obviously, Florida has been really severely hit in that sector. Strategic infrastructure investments, small business development, workforce training, broadband deployment, and other discussions. The reason I put this slide up here is because I think some of these recurring themes will probably migrate over into some of the American Rescue Plan funding applications that we're likely to see when our funding announcement comes out. As I mentioned, we're working on our funding announcement for the ARPA funds, and it's important for folks to realize a couple things. There's a lot of federal funding out there that's coming down the pike, so it's really incumbent on local governments and other eligible applicants to really organize, prepare themselves, and focus. Right? I mean, I'm kind of speaking fairly obviously, but it is important to kind of really think about your economic development priorities kind of moving forward. I would encourage everyone to read EDA's CARES Act Notice of Funding Opportunity, which came out in May of last year. I would also recommend communities interested in having a discussion with EDA or thinking about putting in applications to EDA under the ARPA, join our mailing list. Go on to eda.gov and you'll see a box there to join our mailing list. That way you'll be notified as soon as the ARPA funding announcement comes out. I will not be able to reach back to the 400 municipalities or so across the state of Florida to let them know that the funding announcement is out. So it's incumbent on you to take some responsibility in that respect. You're going to need to review EDA's investment priorities. I'm going to talk more about those momentarily. Reach out to your RPC. Reach out to Mark, Aralda, and Isabel, and have a discussion with the South Florida Regional Planning Council, and sort of use their technical assistance to help you think about potential projects. As I mentioned, you need to identify your economic development priorities and review funding opportunities. There's a lot of things out there. I mentioned the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds, $350 billion. Those funds have started to flow. The first tranche has started to flow. There will be a second tranche. There's a lot of money coming to South Florida. I mean, just to Miami-Dade, Broward, and Monroe counties, there will be over $2/3 of $1 billion coming under the coronavirus state and local funds. So those funds can be used for a number of things, including infrastructure. Now, it's important to realize those funds cannot be used as local match for EDA. We just learned that just the other day. So that's just an important consideration. We had asked the question internally, and the answer has come back no. We cannot use the state and local coronavirus recovery funds as local match. So there's the $350 billion there, the $3 billion that's coming to EDA. USDA has additional funding. Broadband USA has announced a $288 million program for broadband deployment. And SBA, of course, has a lot of different programs, including the Restaurant Revitalization Fund and others that will help our communities recover from the effects of the coronavirus. So one of the things that people need to understand is that EDA reviews projects on a competitive merit basis, right? So that means when we look at applications that come to EDA for funding potential, we evaluate the projects to determine whether or not they meet EDA's investment priorities. Do they create high quality jobs for our communities? Do they demonstrate leveraging public and private resources? We certainly want, we want to know that there is a local match and other, other partners involved in projects. Can the project move quickly? Can it essentially be implemented in a reasonable amount of time? And is there a clear scope of work and measurable outcomes? I think Aralda and Mark mentioned about the making sure that you can discuss your economic outcomes. I'm not going to read these in great detail, but just understand that EDA has updated its investment priorities as of April 14th of this year. We have added equity as our first investment priority. We've also added technology-based economic development and environmentally sustainable development as new investment priorities. So we have 7 investment priorities. What does that mean? That means that when you come to EDA for a potential project, besides job creation and private sector investment, which are obviously important metrics for EDA and outcomes, we want to know, does the project meet or advance at least one or more of these investment priorities? Now, when you have a discussion with me, when you're talking about the project, you've got to demonstrate how your project meets or exceeds one of these investment priorities. So again, those are the new investment priorities, and I would kind of look at those when you have a chance offline. I'm going to just talk about some sample funded projects because it's always good to give people an idea of some of the things we funded. So under the CARES Act last year, these are just a sampling of projects we funded across across the state. We announced earlier this year funding to the City of Lake City, Columbia County, to update a hangar facility to be used by a maintenance, repair, and overhaul, a major employer in City of Lake City, $2.3 million grant. Because of the real severe impact of Florida in terms of the tourism and travel market, Visit Florida came to us and sought funding to prepare a tourism recovery marketing strategy. And that was a $5 million grant that we provided to Visit Florida. Now, why do I put that up there? I put that up there because many destination marketing organizations contacted EDA. And again, just bear in mind that regional projects, we've got limited resources. So where you can bring regional projects together, those are always going to be important for EDA to consider. We're not going to have enough funding to do discrete individual projects, in every community in Florida. So where you can certainly partner on a regional basis, that's really a really important consideration. We also provided Enterprise Florida with funds to do a virtual trade show to support small and medium-sized manufacturers and supply chain providers, materials providers. So that just took place earlier this year, and that was very successful. And we also provided increased revolving loan fund capitalization to the 2 RPCs that currently run revolving loan funds in the state of Florida, Appalachia and South Florida. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. But importantly, as Aralda mentioned, we also provided the 10 RPCs, or regional planning councils across the state of Florida, funding to provide for them to hire economic recovery coordinators. And those coordinators are supposed to meet with and discuss and provide technical assistance to communities that are looking to secure economic recovery in the face of COVID-19. So I also wanted to kind of give you folks kind of a snapshot of funding that we've provided to the South Florida region, to Monroe, Miami-Dade, and Broward County over the past 5 years. And we've provided a little over $25 million in a number of projects over the past 5 years. As I mentioned, we provided a grant just recently to South Florida Regional Planning Council to enhance its CARES Act revolving loan fund. That's currently in operation right now, and they're doing great work in that respect. In 2019, we provided a major grant to the College of the Florida Keys for their Upper Keys Center in Key Largo. That's a screenshot of the facility topping out ceremony. John, I just borrowed that picture from you guys' website. Hope you don't mind. So, but exciting project. Yeah, we're really excited about, and that's going to provide for skills training in some of the leading sectors in Monroe County. So very exciting project there. Earlier, also in 2019, we provided a grant to the city of Coral Springs to reduce and ameliorate stormwater impacts to its corporate park, and we provided them a $2.8 million grant to make those improvements. We also provided a grant to Miami-Dade County and the South Florida Regional Planning Council to create a strategic economic development plan for South Dade, focusing on the opportunities and the industrial potential for that part of Miami-Dade County. And there's a screenshot of the cover right there. And last but not least, we provided a grant a couple of years ago to Monroe County to support its post-disaster recovery planning in the face of Hurricane Irma. So a lot of interesting projects across the board there. I'm not going to dwell on this, but again, it's important for me to emphasize the fact that when you come to EDA for project applications, each project must be consistent with that local regional comprehensive economic development strategy. So you must secure that letter of consistency from South Florida Regional Planning Council for the 3-county South Florida region. And as Isabel mentioned, they're the designated economic development district for South Florida. So these are some of the things that they do as part of that designation from us. So it's interesting to know that there's a lot of value added that economic development districts across the state of Florida are providing. Increasingly, they're looking at this notion of economic resiliency in a really important way, and they're really drilling down on what this means. Now, we're not talking environmental resiliency specifically. We're talking economic resiliency, although in some ways that certainly could incorporate environmental resiliency as part of that underpinning. Just for example, East Central Florida Regional Planning Council has got a resiliency task force that's looking at people, places, and prosperity, and they're trying to figure out how to strengthen their ecosystem to support recovery and resiliency kind of moving forward. Most recently in Jacksonville, the Northeast Florida Regional Planning Council, I'll talk about that more in a moment. But getting back to the CEDS, why is the CEDS planning process why is it important for your region? It's important because really the CEDS is a conduit for resources to your region. And really the CEDS becomes a place and a planning process where you can discuss economic development ideas, visions, and directions in a process which really looks at sort of regional assets across South Florida. So what I would say to the South Florida local governments and stakeholders on this call is take advantage of the CEDS planning process to convene, organize, and consider how best to use state, local, and federal resources to create the conditions for an inclusive economic recovery and resiliency. There's a lot of publications out now that talk about the American Recovery Plan Act resources. U.S. Conference of Mayors and Drexel University has put out an American Rescue Plan guide This has detailed information on the different funding opportunities that are available across the federal spectrum. The National Association of Counties has done a great job of kind of digesting and distilling the important points about ARPA funding. And the Council of State Governments has also got some really easily digestible documents out there that talk about the resources that are available. So I would encourage you folks to look at those documents and more. So this is a screenshot of EDA's grant process. Essentially, it starts with a conversation. Now, I mentioned, you should certainly reach out to the Regional Planning Council and sort of reach out to me. The conversation is very informal. We have a conversation, and it could be something like, "Hey, Greg, we're looking at doing a project that's going to do X. Here's some of the details. Here's the region. Here are the impacts. What do you think about that? Is something like that eligible?" And the gist of the conversation would be, yes, that's something that potentially EDA could consider. You probably need to refine your proposal, your budget, your scope of work, based on that discussion, you would be then preparing an application, or alternatively looking at a different funding source if there obviously wasn't a good fit for EDA. So a lot of people ask me, well, where do we start with EDA or with any federal funding agency? Well, you've got to look at the context, right? So we've had now a year and a half of living with COVID-19. So there's been a lot of disruptions. Obviously, there's been supply chain disruptions across pretty much all industry sectors across the world, not just in Florida or the U.S. Small business has been impacted disproportionately so. Digital trends are certainly accelerating. There's been a lot of talk about remote working and learning, and there's going to be a lot of disruption in terms of what it means. Are people going to go back to the office structure as they had on a pre-pandemic basis, or is there going to be a move towards sort of a hybrid model? My supposition is it's going to be a hybrid model. How that's going to play out, I don't know. But certainly, enterprise, Florida Trend has started to look at things. They had a recent article about a week ago talking about Florida's workplace redefined. It was looking at Chico's, headquartered in Fort Myers, and they've decided to go and adopt a hybrid model, which means that they're going to be leasing out or subleasing their headquarters campus to other business interests. So a lot of ripple effects across the real estate, commercial, industrial marketplace there. So all this to say, we've really got to pay attention to reimagining a resilient economy, what that means, right? What that means to your respective community. It's going to be different in Miami. It's potentially different in Broward County, and it's certainly going to be different in Monroe County. So let's talk a little bit about resilience. From EDA's perspective, when we talk about resilience, we're talking about the ability of a community or a region to anticipate, withstand, and bounce back successfully from shocks and stresses to that economy. And it could come from obviously hurricanes. Florida's not immune to those things, right? We've got 17 to 20 named storms coming down the pike this year. God help us, keep my fingers crossed. I live in Florida too, so I'm going to be, riding out those storms with you all as well. Closure of a major employer, decline of an important industry, COVID-19, and others, right? So as I mentioned, a lot of regional planning councils are really trying to get a handle on what economic resiliency means to them. So East Central Florida, for example, is looking at how do we strengthen our economic ecosystem to make it more resilient? How do we incentivize and increase investment in our region's clusters, especially those clusters that are growing faster and have the ability to create high quality jobs in emerging industries, and maybe some sectors that we haven't even thought about yet. Northeast Florida, centered in Jacksonville, has unveiled a COVID-19 economic recovery plan which will eventually be folded into their respective SEDS plan. What are they looking at? They've decided to look at the coronavirus recovery from a policy focus that looks at 3 areas. One is infrastructure. How do we rebuild and sort of refine and revitalize a lot of legacy infrastructure? How do we support small business recovery and resiliency? And how do we look at the issue of equity as an important consideration and bring those underserved and minority communities into a broader framework for job growth and private sector investment, especially from an entrepreneurship standpoint. So the last 2 slides here are important from a project development standpoint. When you come to us and when you come to the RPC to discuss your project, we want you folks to clearly identify the region. Now, you think that this is a trick question. It's not a trick question. If your project is only going to have benefits to Monroe County, then say so. If it's going to have multiple county benefits, articulate which counties are going to be impacted. If it's going to have statewide impacts, make that notion as well. Again, we're not trying to trick you up here. We're just asking you to define what the impact area is. Identify the region's economic development priorities. We've got to have clear and distinct proposals, right? We're going to have a lot of applications to review. So use clear and unambiguous language. Tell us clearly what you want to do, whether it's a construction project or non-construction project. Tell us what you want to do, who it's going to benefit, and what are the expected outcomes from the project. Obviously, SEDS consistency, we talked about that. What are the regional impacts? So consider using the REMI model to articulate some of the jobs and private sector impacts. Identify possible funding sources. So for EDA, it's going to be local match, which is going to be local, state funding, private sector funding, foundation funding. Those are kind of the typical funding sources. Can't match federal to federal. So then when you come to us, after you've met with your regional planning council, you should have a clear and distinct proposal in hand to talk to me about. Remember, we have to obligate that ARPA funding by September 30th of 2022. We are going to be working really quickly. And so it's incumbent on folks to really start thinking about these projects. If you've got them refined, now is the time to have that discussion. So it's important to kind of realize, bring the project team together, develop your budget. That has to relate back to the scope of work. How does the project align with EDA's investment priorities? I talked about those 7: equity, recovery and resiliency, workforce development, manufacturing. Now, your project could meet or exceed, 2 or 3 of these. So if it does, indicate how it does. And for construction projects, we need to know what jobs will be created as a result of the construction project. Now, I'm not talking construction jobs. I'm talking about full-time equivalent jobs that are resulting from the sewer line extension or the roadway extension or the, broadband delivery or whatever it happens to be. And identify the source, nature, and amount of all non-EDA funding. If you cannot provide local match to the project, your application is not complete. So you've got to have all those pieces in place when you make an application. And you've also got to talk to us about the project timing. If you have a project that has to get out of the ground in 2 months' time, that's not going to be realistic for EDA. EDA has a review process for construction projects that generally takes 6 to 9 months. Yes, we will work as quickly as we can, but we cannot shortchange our review process. It is what it is. So if you've got a fast burn on some project, then EDA may not be the appropriate vehicle for you folks to pursue funding on. With that, I'll leave you my contact information. Best way to reach me is either my cell or email. Usually I try to respond to people either the same day or the following day. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, very happy to talk to you today about EDA and our investment programs.
All right, thank you, Greg.
You're welcome.
Well, so I'll just briefly go over the CARES Act program, which is part of my job with the council as an economic disaster recovery coordinator. Hold on, bear with me. Can you see this? Oh, there it is. Okay, perfect. So I will go really quick for this program, and so that if you have any questions for Greg or for us, please, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So as Greg mentioned, so in 2020 of August, we were awarded by the EDA, the SFRC was recently awarded the funding from EDA to support economic resilience efforts across the region directly related to the coronavirus pandemic. So the awarded project will enable us and the council to help the region to prepare for, prevent, and respond to existing and future impacts by expanding its economic development, COVID response activities, including, like we also all mentioned, technical assistance and enhancing regional planning, collaboration, and intergovernmental coordination among local governments, economic development organizations, the business community, and other key stakeholders. So my role at the council is to serve as a liaison between local, state, and federal partners to assist the South Florida region prepare for, prevent, and respond to existing and future impacts by expanding economic development, COVID response activities. I've spoken personally with most of you, some of you. I look forward to speaking with the rest of you. As Greg said, please don't be shy to reach out to us or to me if you have any questions or anything, because like I said, part of my work is to be the liaison between all of you, the state, and the federal government. I'm here to assist with researching federal, state, and philanthropic grants, which I have also shared with you before. We're always updating the list, and it's also posted. I have another slide after this with the links of where the funding opportunities in our website are. So we're developing an appropriate avenue for communicating same to the most impacted communities and stakeholders in the region, implement economic recovery and resilience plans with the goal of rebuilding resilient and sustainable communities throughout South Florida.
I have no idea who
So
CFR Florida
what?
Planning Council.
So if you are not unmute, if you could please mute yourself. 2 more seconds and I'll be done. The work plan that the council has for the CARES Act program is the immediate response activities were economic damage assessment, the survey that you all took, and we went through that in our previous informational session that we had back in February. Establish an action plan tied to SEDS, establish inventory of context, needs, and priorities, and monitor economic conditions. Short-term recovery activities where next steps include the establishment of an economic resilience committee for South Florida to ensure that efforts are informed by local perspectives and are responsive to local and regional needs. This committee will include representatives from the Tri-County area, including chambers, economic development organizations, academic institutions. Lastly, it's the long-term recovery activities include the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of the Regional Economic Resilience Plan, development of an outreach program, facilitation of economic resilience webinars. We are in the process actually of putting together a webinar with the Tri-County mayors focusing on coronavirus planning, response, and recovery in South Florida, because issues facing each county and how the new American Rescue Plan funds will be applied. Keep an eye for an email from us for further details on the date and time of the webinar. Feel free also to check our website under events, because this will be posted there as well, or you can follow us on social media, LinkedIn or Facebook, because all of our upcoming webinars will be shared on our social media as well. The next of the long-term recovery activities is the tackling assistance, which we've spoken throughout the entire day today. But the assistance, as Mark said, and as Greg has said, varies on a case-by-case basis. Aside from all the services mentioned, we also offer like the grant assistance, like Greg mentioned, and this can range from a letter of support that you draft, or the council manages your grant, or partner with your agency and give recommendations. Just something to keep of note, sometimes the procurement service process is easier if you are contracting with another governmental agency rather than a private sector consultant. And lastly, part of the long-term recovery activities under the CARES Act program is the promotion and outreach of the CARES Act revolving loan fund. I will go very briefly in here. Aside from the regular loan fund, we have the CARES Act program that the EDA partnered with us to oversee and administer the new 5.9 million CARES Act business revolving loan fund program that will alleviate sudden and severe economic dislocation caused by the coronavirus in Monroe, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. Just something to keep in mind if you have any questions. The program is a long-term financing program. They can be combined with economic injury disaster loans, paycheck protection program, PPP loans, or the state of Florida bridge loan program. This program is not a grant or forgivable loans. So if in your cities, you know, small businesses who are suffering and they need assistance, please reach out to us, or actually Jeff Tart. He's Jeff Tart or Steve Foreman, who are managing this program. The loan information, you can see the interest rate is fixed between 3 and 4%, duration up to 10 years. You have to be a small business, sole proprietor, or 501c3 organization located within Monroe, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties to qualify for this this loan. The availability of funds at the moment, out of the 5 million, we have 1.8 million left. So again, follow us on social media. All this information is posted in there. Reach out to me and I will connect you with the right person. And lastly, we have posted on our website additional resources as they relate to funding grants, EDA funding opportunities. But like Greg said, please make sure that you join their mailing list so you get updated information on the new upcoming American Rescue Plan grant application and additional information that you need to submit. The same resources that Greg mentioned, we have also posted those on our website, and I will share this with you. This presentation will be shared with you after this program is over. And also the funding list that like I mentioned earlier, that might be useful to public, private, nonprofit organizations. And with that, I will open it for questions, open discussion. If you have any, does anyone have any questions or comments, or for us, for Greg, please. No? Well, I have a question for Greg. So, Greg, can municipalities or other qualified organizations apply for an EDA grant together if the project aligns with EDA investment priorities of equity and workforce development? Can two cities get together and apply for this type of, yeah, go ahead.
Right. So the short answer is yes. The more direct answer is, you know, it depends on the project, obviously, but yes, the like I said, the short answer is yes. We definitely, the project example I provided there for City, Columbia County joined that effort as a co-applicant because, and why did they join that effort? Well, because obviously the job impacts would affect the county, but also because the county provided a grant assistance to the city in that regard. So there are many different ways that cities and counties or cities can work together. So it really just depends on the particular project, but the short answer is yes.
Perfect, perfect. Please, everyone, whoever you're online, feel free to ask questions. We want to hear from you. So this is not just a one-sided presentation from EDA and the council. So Cynthia, do you have any questions for us? Do you need any clarifications or anything? No? Okay. Well, I have another question.
Aralda, I'm sorry, this is Sue from the EDC, Sue DePaz.
Yes,
I
Sue.
do have a couple of questions, and I think it's more directed for Mark Cassidy because it's in reference to the REMI capabilities. It's a couple of questions, and I think they both relate to that. We have two projects we're currently involved in. One is the redevelopment of a large mall down here in South Miami-Dade. We've been asked to provide information on climate change and sea level rise, and it's sort of need a little guidance here on how could the REMI report provide any regional economic impacts if we were to provide the details on the proposed development that we're looking at. And my second question is also, we've engaged with Space Florida. They've been coming down here a couple of times. We've had meetings with them so that way we can engage with businesses that are in the aeronautical industry. So with those two general scenarios, how could the REMI reports provide insight for us?
Great question, Sue. Thank you for asking. So those are both very interesting projects that definitely relate to REMI and something that REMI could provide some insights on. I'd love to talk to you more about the details of your project, but basically, so to put it, back of the napkin type, analysis, if you have a presentation and you're modeling, say, vulnerability, and so you have a floodplain map with businesses in the floodplain, we could put them at risk and we could compare the economy versus with that area flourishing economically versus if it was not because it was inundated by sea level rise, for example. Obviously, like I said, I need more details exactly what you're looking to do, but we could quantify the number of businesses in those risk areas and then value specifically those businesses in that area to show you that if there's an X dollar amount of economic value that needs to be protected. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And I will be reaching out to you, Mark.
Very good, very good. On your second question about Space Florida and engaging the aeronautical industry, that seems relatively more straightforward. We could easily, another back of the napkin type idea would be, we could estimate the economic impact for, say, bringing in 100 aeronautical jobs. We can break that down by the type of industry that the job is in and the average salary. We could use those as inputs, and then we could easily calculate an output on that.
Okay, that's excellent. Then I will definitely reach out to you after this meeting and provide a little bit more detail.
Great, very good.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. On that note, does anybody have any other questions about economic impact modeling or another potential project that they'd be interested in doing so for? Good, silence is golden.
Yeah.
Any
other questions that some people might have? Or I can move forward with my questions for Greg, probably. Sorry, Greg.
Sorry.
Are there any matching requirements for construction or non-construction projects? I think you touched upon it, but I know we've heard this before from other municipalities. It's a recurring question.
Right. Generally speaking, there are always match requirements in terms of our regular programs. So regular appropriations, our funding levels are 50%. So on $1 million project, the local match would be $500,000 and the federal share would be $500,000. when we have disaster supplementals, whether it's hurricane related or obviously a once in a lifetime pandemic like we had, funding, the federal funding participation increases. Now under CARES Act funding, EDA's funding sort of default funding participation was 80%. Now, is that going to be the same as far as ARPA is concerned? I don't know. My guess is probably it will be that level, which means that a minimum of 20% will be required as the local match. Now, local match for construction projects, generally speaking, we're going to want to have cash involved in that project because we're building something. For non-construction projects, again, cash is always better, but we can look at in-kind in terms of what is the actual work that the applicant is going to be putting into the effort. Can they value that effort? And if we can have some assurance that that valuation is reasonably determined, then we can consider that as local match. It's important to realize that local match has to be related to the scope of work. So in other words, if you're coming to EDA for us to build you a building and you provide the land, that's not local match. It's great that you provided the land, but you need the land to build on anyways. So the local match has to be related to the construction of that building. So that's just another thing. That's a question that comes up often in discussions with us. So you know, we can certainly go you know, get into more details, but that's generally speaking, that's kind of the outline of local match. I hope that answers your question.
I think so, yes. Thank you so much, I appreciate it.
Sure.
So another question for you is, should economic developers be using this opportunity to apply for small yet clearly defined projects, or more so to seek out larger projects to grow the economic margin?
Okay, and that's a good question. I think you know, I think it really depends on what the economic development priorities are for respective applicants. I would say again, because the funding is going to be allocated you know, to broken down by EDA's regional offices and headquarters, to the extent possible, you're going to want to look at regional projects. And yes, can we accommodate larger projects? Yes, we can. But until we have the funding notice details, I can't really say what that larger amount is. Now, average grant size for an EDA construction project is about 1.5 million on a 50-50 basis. That translates to about a $3 million project. Obviously, under disaster supplemental funding, we can go higher than that amount. What that amount is, I don't know, but it certainly could be many times that average grant size. So again, that's going to be detailed in the funding announcement when it is released soon. I mean, that's what Washington is telling us. They're going to be releasing it very soon, and so we're just gearing up to anticipate the release and have these discussions with people. So hope that answers your question. Kind of long-winded, but hopefully it answers it.
I think so. Anybody else has any questions? This is your chance if you need any clarification on the EDA process, grant process, or whatnot.
Aralda, I have a question if I can ask a question regarding the grants. Hi, how are you? So as it relates to EDA grants, can you combine EDA grants with other federal grant opportunities? And I guess I'm specifically thinking about Federal Transit Administration grants.
Well, again, we can't match federal to federal. So the only exception in that case is our CDBG funds, which have lost their federal earmarks. Those generally would apply to the smaller scale non-entitlement communities that are drawing down CDBG funds from the state. Now, your question though, is it Raylan?
Yes, Raylan.
Hey, really. So, but here's the interesting question to it, and you asked kind of a nuanced question, and so I'll give you a nuanced answer. It is possible that EDA could carve out a separate scope of work within a larger project that you're talking about, you know, and so in that instance, we would look for a different local match to bring, you know, to make our project whole, right? Which would be separate from the DOT funds. But we could do a project within a larger, you know, transportation project. And I don't know what that could be, but, you know, maybe it's maybe it's an incubator project, or maybe it's you know, specialized facility of some sort, which will help to advance economic development, right? So a lot of people are talking about, you know, bringing these larger projects to bear. So we can certainly have an offline discussion about how EDA could participate in a larger project like that.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Any questions?
Geraldo, let me just mention to the folks here, I know, you know, some folks may have some questions. So by all means, you know, please do not hesitate to reach out to me offline. There are no dumb questions. You can ask me any question. If I can give you an answer right away, I'll do that. If I have to dig deeper and get you an answer, I will do that as well. So again, these are all good questions, and you know, I'm happy to take them offline, you know, or later on. So just kind of letting you folks know that this is the intent of this discussion today was to really start the conversation, and to let people know that you know, we've got good partners on the ground at South Florida Regional Planning Council. Use those resources, refine your ideas, and you know, reach out to Geraldo, Mark, and then reach out to me. You know, it before the project is submitted, as I mentioned, it's a fairly informal discussion. You know, I take notes, but you know, we're a different federal agency from some of the others that you may have had experience working with. We provide a lot of technical assistance, and I'm with you through the entire grant review process. I don't shut you off to different people. It's just me. So you got me, and I'm the person that kind of guides you through the entire process. So it's a fairly straightforward endeavor with EDA.
Perfect. Anybody else before? I have no more questions personally. So if anybody else has any questions for Greg or for us, please go ahead, ask away. No, everybody's being so shy.
It's Zoom fatigue, probably.
Probably. Yeah. So, well, with that said, then I will, we can just finish early. We're right on time, actually, even though we had until noon. But hope this session was of value to you all today. Hope we can continue our conversation. And like Greg said, please feel free to reach out to him. Talk to us, Mark and I, or Isabel, how we can help you with anything, all of our services, and we would be happy to do so. And with that, thank you and have a lovely rest of the week.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you
Have
very
a
much.
wonderful holiday.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.